Welcome to the Audiation in the Wild podcast with your hosts, Bo Talifer and Eric Rasmussen. Hi, quick note before we have our interview with Hal Galper. If you don't know Hal Galper, he has played on 11 albums with Phil Woods. He's played with Sam Rivers. It's an amazing list. Cannonball Adderley, Chet Baker, on and on. He's a true bebop great pianist, and the note really is about the audio quality, like we had prior. So just note that this is a Zoom recording audio, but it's a tremendous conversation. Hope you enjoy it.
Ah, hey,
Al, you made it.
There he is. I recognize this man. You went to Mansfield University with Phil Woods.
Where?
Mansfield University, North Central Pennsylvania, with Phil Woods.
Oh, wow.
Back in the
80s.
early 80s, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a blast. I was a huge fan.
When it was a quartet, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
it.
Goodman and Goodwin, and I think, right? Wasn't it?
Yep. I couldn't have had I'm playing bebop with real beboppers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
How lucky can you get?
I was privileged. I was like first row. It was amazing.
Give me an idea what this is all about today. I'm not sure I understand.
We're a bunch of crazy music educator thinkers, and we came upon a theory of how music is being learned through a guy named Edwin Gordon, and he's done like 50 years worth of research that's like really incredible, top-notch kind of research, but he's ignored because he's called other music education programs on the carpet. You know,
you send me some information on this guy?
Sure, yeah.
But I have my own research that I've done. I'd like to see how it matches up or not.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it'll match up because you're a jazzer, and he played with Gene Krupa for a little on bass, which is where some of his ideas for how rhythm is understood. He coined a term called audiation, and audiation basically means it's a deeper level of inner hearing, which is a common term that the Kodai people might use, or Kodai, Suzuki. What else is there? Or there's like all these factions in music education, and Bo and I have a theory that it's all linked together because people become great musicians regardless of the kind of training that they've gotten. Sometimes they overcome.
Why do self-taught musicians always have incredibly stock voices, recognizable voices? All of them have recognizable voices. They're individuals. It has to do with what you're talking. I'm getting excited now.
Yeah. So I work with babies to 7-8-year-olds and develop their pre-audiation, and then as they turn 3, 4, 5, they start to sing into and move rhythmically. Then you start developing more vocabulary and expect them to
And Eric,
grow.
I'd like to just even unpack what you're saying. Like what Eric's saying when he's teaching these young kids, like he's teaching them music, like you would learn music in like a tribe. Like you're being acculturated into the musical experience through sound. You're participating in movement and dance. You're not necessarily
basically the oral tradition.
The oral tradition. That's really why we're reaching out to you, because this stuff's all over you.
I'm writing an article on it now. It's a very difficult one for me. It's been a challenge.
But anyways, go ahead, Eric. I cut you off. But.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's like bringing these children through their music babble to the point where they start to understand things, and then if you're acculturated and brought up through music that really swings. Right? Or all of the above. There's nothing out of the limits other than stuff that might be too long, because I can't play a whole symphony for a group of 4-year-olds. Although that would be great if they did go to one and sit through it with the for parents or whatever. But bottom line is they're just immersed in all the tonalities, all the meters that I can give them. And I make shit fun and get them to just dance and be expressive, get their bodies immersed in their ears. And it comes out in the wash depending on their aptitude, because not all kids are born to learn the same rate as others.
Right.
So I'm just playing and dancing and crazy, having fun. I had 120 kids. Today's my first day I taught live, and I had 120 kids,
Wow.
Class of 10 or 15, one after the, like that. And I'm playing this Joshua Bell or Snarky Puppy. Joshua Bell played Parati with some percussionists and some band. Oh, but it was just, and I'm having a blast. And if I am, they are, right?
We should unpack a bit more of like, I found Eric because, guy interested in jazz. Same thing you're interested in. How do you make the jazz lines bring out the harmony and the rhythm at the same time and fit in the cultural context of the genre and the whole tradition? Like, how do you bring all that online? And that's
an interesting point, because people talk about the two aspects of teaching: information or process.
Yeah.
Either one or the other. You're either information oriented or process oriented. But actually, it's a three-legged stool, not a two-legged stool. The that's missing is the cultural envelope that this music existed in, because art always expresses a culture, and the break of the continuum and the current way of teaching, information only, not process, has created a break in the carrying on of the tradition. So I mean, all the information you need is there in the tradition. All you got to do is get into it. But what was I talking about? I have short-term memory problems, so you have to get me back.
I think we all do.
I'm catching up to you. I'm right behind you.
What I was gonna say is, I found your work, Hal, and Eric's work, and just all of you guys have really interesting ideas. But I found you guys trying to learn how to, improvise and compose in this jazz tradition, and how your work came up over the past few years. Because you're one of the guys that, in my mind, really talks about this very clearly, this whole problem. But you've probably seen this 1,000 times with students. A lot of them just don't know the jazz history well enough through sound to even start to improvise. And yet a lot of people are trying to improvise over changes, but they don't have the melody internalized or the traditions of the tunes through the 20s, 30s, and 40s. There are certain musical cliches and vocabulary of melody and harmony that you kind of have to internalize before you get the big picture, and to start just taking a solo on a set of scales before you've absorbed all that vocabulary. Yeah, it's almost just like a fool's errand.
It is. Exactly. You have to look at it this way. If New School has 100 students, right, and what's the yield? 1 to 3% of really great players out of 100, if you're lucky. 1 to 3%. That means the other 98, 97% are paying for those people's education. That's fucked up. Excuse me.
No, fair enough.
Something wrong with that, with the numbers on that. There's got to be a cheaper way to teach people, a less wasteful way. And most of the jazz departments to date have been run by old white men. That doesn't help either. This problem of the lack of culture, it has weakened the jazz continuum. I've seen it happen at the New School. The New School is now falling apart, jazz apart, because they have no culture to support it. It's the culture. Without the cultural envelope, and that's what I'm trying to figure out for this article, is the universals involved in the oral tradition, right? Because I went to the oral tradition website and they said there's 6,700 non-English speaking people, each who have their own oral tradition.
Yeah.
But we don't have the culture. They have, at least it's embedded in the culture. We don't. It's fear. It's been removed from the culture, and that's why nobody's swinging and nobody has the idea about what's going on, because I mean, teachers don't play with students.
Oh, I mean, I completely agree. I completely agree. And you know, I know you're a big fan of the apprenticeship model, which I think all of us are, because it's really the only thing that works.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, you get people who are listening to records and they learn the vocabulary and they turn into great players. But clearly, this apprenticeship model over the last over 100 years has even longer. It's all these great classical composers come in pairs. It's not a surprise.
Yes.
And I love to hear you talk for a sec. Like, what's the relationship between the oral, in your mind, the oral tradition of learning music and learning vocabulary or licks? Like, why is that such an important thing to you? And it is to me as well, because I've seen the difference when people do it and the difference when what happens when they don't do it.
Miles said if something sounds good, was it? Who said that? Might have been Schillinger said, if something sounds good, there are reasons why.
Yeah.
All right. So if you hear something that sounds good and you copy it, you are learning the reasons.
But your book, Forward Motion, goes into this in a lot of detail, and it's a great time.
What I'm trying to say is the music has the rules within them. That's the good part about the oral tradition. That's what the oral tradition recognizes, that the Western tradition doesn't. That the rules are in the music, and that you learn the rules by collecting the vocabulary, a varied vocabulary, and practicing it in all 12 keys and not internalizing it. That word smacks of memorization. This is not memorization. This is embedding.
Yeah, it's grafted into your nervous system actually
right to the early brain. That's where it's all happening.
Yeah.
In the early brain, the limbic system.
Yeah.
That's where it's all happening. That's where the computer is that's doing billions of calculations every picosecond.
There's a great Joe Pass lesson video series, and I used to just watch this obsessively in my 20s. And he's playing over these changes, and he makes this little melody da 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 over one change, and they're trying to get him to explain his thinking, and he just does the same motif over the next two chords. He's like, well, I just went da 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 da, so I was thinking I could go da 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 over these next chords, and you can tell that's about how complicated it is in his thinking process. But if you try to
what he's responding to unawares is patterning.
Yeah.
And the way it's very complicated. The brain is a pattern instrument. It looks for patterns. And one of the things you'll notice in all jazz improvisation is this AAB format. The blues is AAB format. All right. That's where it came from. So you'll have and then that's A, and then B, and then in other words, the first two A's set up the prediction part of the brain to expect to hear a third A. But what happens is B. The first two set up the pattern. B breaks the pattern. It's a problem. You have to improvise a solution.
Oh, I mean,
to the broken pattern.
That gets me way too fired up. I was talking to Eric about this a couple months ago, where you take these little songs like Mary Had a Little Lamb. It has this internal structure that's really rock solid. Da 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 da. But in my mind, I mean, if you're improvising with that, and we'll get more into what forward motion is, but improvising with motifs and those kinds of patterns often is what's done at these higher levels. People have internalized what notes are in the changes and what flies over the chords, but it's these higher level motifs or patterns that people start playing around with when they really start kind of soaring over the changes or improvising.
Yeah, superimposition comes into it. Where you're superimposing over the changes eventually themselves become guides, not just the melody.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing. Yeah.
I want to get a little bit of your history. When did this idea of learning to improvise and bring out the changes in a melody and have the rhythm online and the changes just perfectly outline the harmonic structure of the song? When did that become like a really conscious goal of yours? Like when were you really hunting that skill down? Because that's something I got into, over the last 10 years, and you can see players that have it down. Parker is, for me, is like the model of this. The everything is just where it needs to be. And like, when did that whole thing become like a target for you?
There was an album of Bill Evans called Everybody Digs Bill Evans. You remember that album?
Oh, yeah.
There were testimonials from different musicians on the cover, and on the back, Cannonball was quoted as saying, Bill, I'm paraphrasing, made what he played sound like the best possible thing he could have played at that moment. When I saw that, I said, wait a minute, best possible? You mean there are gradations of ideas? If that's the case, I want to play the best possible ideas at a given moment. And I had to define what a best possible idea was.
Yeah.
My definition was an idea, a melodic phrase that independently spells out the changes so clearly you can hear them without a chord being played behind it. That was it. And that led me to forward motion.
And so, I mean, the subtitle of Forward Motion, I think, from Bach to Bebop, in your mind, because in my mind, the similarities between Parker and Bach are they're the same thing, basically. What is the same thing? Like, what is Forward Motion? Why is Bach actually the same as Bebop? In a certain way, there's something about it that's so similar.
It swings.
Yeah.
I have there was one video I had where I had the student play a Bach piece straight eighths the way it would usually be played, and I said, okay, now you play it with a swing beat, and it turned into jazz.
Have you heard Eugene? I think his name's Eugene. Is it Eugene Cicero? Is that his name? I could be mistaken. He has an album. It's just like swinging Bach and swinging Chopin. It's unreal. It's and he's got he's got the proper halftime feel that you talked about in the book that we got to get
done before. The Swingle singers did it. The Swingle singers did it. Years ago. It's been done before.
it's just a great time, It's lovely. Yeah.
So you were talking about. Anyway, go ahead. Ask me the questions.
I was just curious. Like, so what is forward motion? I mean, what's the simplest way you'd explain this to somebody? So I feel like I have a pretty good idea, but I'd love to hear it, from the horse's mouth.
It's all about tension and release.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And tension equals swing. So how much tension in the music equals how much it swings. So
maybe if I give you
upbeats are tension, downbeats are resolution.
Yeah.
So if you start on an M beat, you created tension in the ear. It needs to be resolved. Automatically, the ear, the human body is self-correcting. It always wants to maintain balance. That's its directive, right? If you create chaos, it's going to find a solution for it as quick as possible. That's the way it works. Same thing. If you create tension, it needs to be released. The question is when.
So the question is when. When's a great question. So why is beat one the end of the last bar and not the start of the new bar?
Because everything stops there. It's a resolution beat. It's the strongest resolution beat in the bar.
Because I think
what do you need? What do you need? All right, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that single idea is, I think, something that a lot of people who are trying to learn how to play over changes don't really get. Is that if you're playing over whatever C minor 7, F7, B flat, if you're going da 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 over C minor and then da 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 over F and then da, the changes are all separate. But if you go da 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 da, you're actually making the beat the the first beat of the bar is actually like the resolution point, and if you're not pre-hearing the arrival of that,
Right.
you're not connecting the changes. It's like you have one perceptual chunk, as you would say, on C minor, and a separate chunk on F7.
Exactly.
And no wonder it's difficult, because the brain can't handle that. It's too much information.
Well, actually, the problem is forward motion notation is too complex to write down. You know, it's
You have some examples of it in your book where if you have a line played with steady eighth notes, you actually, instead of grouping them in fours like it's traditionally done, you have the first eighth note beamed on its own, and then the next three kind of point towards the fifth eighth note that's about to come. And if you notate lines like that, like a Parker line like that, or your lines, or Evans lines, or Bach, they're thinking of how they're playing over the changes. It just becomes crystal clear, because you're like, oh, they're going towards the A note.
right. Right. And like I say in the book, the notes that fall on 1 and 3 are a separate internal melody that you're hearing. That's the guide tones. I'm not hearing the notes that go to them that much, because you can use almost any notes to go to them, and once you get there, it resolves the tension. I mean, you could play 3 wrong notes going to the right fourth note, and it would sound right.
Oh, it's so fun to, I'll come back to this in a sec, but the idea that I got from you about learning licks, and I would say that the first lick that I really put through the ringer was the couple of things that Bert Weigon recommends in his book, and you have a little example of some of the stuff in forward motion, but it's just that little, just how to navigate a couple changes, and I just, you grill that into your nervous system, and what happens is you start to predict the whole line. So if you want to leave some of the notes out, or just do chromatic nonsense up the way, it's not really playing outside, because you can hear the line, but you have this freedom over it. And I've done this with a couple younger high school students, and they pick it up really fast. It's wild.
Yeah.
And it's
I don't know what to say about that.
I mean, it's just fun to just to report how effective kind of what you're advocating is, and there are a few people out there that are talking about that. Like there's a really good lesson where Pat Metheny's teaching a student. He's saying the same thing. It's the rhythm's not okay, and you're not bringing out the chords. Like this is the problem.
And actually, you can play any change on any change.
Yeah.
When you're superimposing, you could be.
But you play any change.
The change could be a C minor. The change could be a C 2/5 to B flat, but I could be playing the 2/5, a D flat minor G flat over the C minor 7. If I synchronize the notes right, the notes that are common to the C minor 7 on 1 and 3, it'll work. I can. For instance, you can play the A major 7 sharp 11 scale over a C triad 10th in the left hand. All right, there'll be no C natural in it. Do you have a piano there?
Eric has one. I don't got one with me.
So say it again.
All right, so in your left hand you play the C triad root 5th 3rd, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gotta do it in tenths. It's a 10th. Right?
Tenths.
Okay, is your hand
Yeah.
lower range.
Oh, I can't.
Oh,
That-
okay.
Unless they do.
Then now you play an A major 7 bebop scale and hold the C chord down and synchronize the E and the A to fall on 1 and 3 of the bar.
Yeah, I can't do what you're saying.
I don't know if
I'm not a bebopper.
All right, I'll play it for you.
All right.
There's no
Yeah,
C,
please.
There's no C in the scale, and it still
Yeah.
sounds consonant because I've synchronized the E and the A of the A scale with the C scale.
Hopefully he's not on a piano down here. Oh, there you go. Oh, I don't know if we made it through. Oh, there you go.
That's it. So I'm playing an A major 7 sharp 11 over a C major chord, and there's no C natural in it.
Yeah, we caught a bit of it.
If the line is strong enough, it'll work. That's the idea. There's an old rule, classical rule. Two ideas can go against each other if they both maintain integrity.
Yeah, got it.
Wrong. If they're wrong.
One of the things that I do is so even at 4 and 5 years old, I teach changes.
Huh.
So, and my kids know 1, 5, 4, and 5 of 5. Some of them, I teach it to them in less than 5 minutes. They learn those 4 changes in major, and then I teach them the same 4 in minor. And then I also teach them in Dorian and Mixolydian and Phrygian and Aeolian, and they just hear these changes. And what I care about is, that you, of course, know where home is and where's not home. Sometimes we go to school, go to the grocery store, come home. Sometimes you just go to the grocery store, come home. Sometimes you're home, and you go to school, come home. And you can go to these different places. Where do you want to go? And we don't talk much vocabulary other than, Mary had a little lamb whose fleece is white as, can I stop there? No. You stop here? Yes. So I got no, yes, no, yes. And then once they learn enough songs with just tonic dominant, then the 4 chord comes in and they go, hey, that's not no, that's not yes. Uh-oh, we have a new one. So we call it uh-oh. And then I don't care became I don't care if I ever came back for its root. So that tune. So they or in a one-horse open sleigh, right? Or wherever it occurs in the songs that they know. And I teach them all these crazy songs in 7/8 and 5/8 and all kinds of mixed up stuff. Because they can handle it. People say, oh, that's too complicated. It's like, no, they can handle it because I give it to them and they tell me that they're ready to learn it. So eventually they learn dominant of the submediant. Well, we don't have enough fingers, so we put our foot up for dominant of the 6th chord.
You spare me the foot.
And so I took a bath today. Anyway, I'm teaching these changes, and it's not about what the changes are as much as when they happen. And once they got the changes, what they play over top of it, what they want to make up over top of it, as long as they understand where they are, I don't care what they play.
Right.
And they make their own choices, what sounds good to them or not. I don't, your example, your A, sharp 11 over C, but as long as you're in the bucket of C right there, and you bring it around, you're in C. So these are the tones of that chord that make the most sense to either emphasize or to mess around with, or to toy around to avoid in some cases, so that the resolution makes a powerful statement that resolve that you talk about. And kids know that internally and naturally, as long as they have an understanding, can audiate, comprehend these changes, not just what they are, but when they change is just as important. It's like, so, and then what they play and make up. I don't get them long enough to the point where they're doing, crazy improvisations, but they do create. They do.
You're talking about a level I know nothing about. I never teach kids. I never teach beginners. I only teach. My approach to teaching is corrective.
Yeah.
Means I teach professionals who've been making the same mistakes long enough to recognize it when it's right, and then I get real radical change real quick.
Yeah.
Sometimes in one lesson I can change a person's playing. But they have to be playing, and they have to have been playing long enough to recognize a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the first things.
Well,
to me, there's no such thing,
Yeah, no, I tell my kids, there's only what you wanted to play. You didn't like something you made up. That's great. you know how to make now you know to make a different choice.
Well, I'm also a very strong proponent of Kuchavitsky. He really, what he had to say in his book just blew me away.
So, Scientific Approach to Playing the Piano, is that the book? Yeah.
Basically, he made the proof that all music is, all practicing is ear training, and all performance is playing by ear. He just basically proved it. If you need something to support the oral tradition, that's the book. And the most revelatory thing is that everybody plays exactly the way they hear. Exactly. What it gave me, it made me realize, like when I ask my students how many of you have a problem playing what you hear, they all raise their hands. And I say, well, that's not true. I says, what you're saying is, I'm hearing it, but I'm not hearing it intensely enough. So it's about how intense the signal from brain to hand is.
Yeah.
See, everybody plays exactly the way they hear. Now you turn that around, that gives you a tremendous analytical tool. If you look at their behavior, physical, mental, and emotional behavior, that's exactly what's happening at that moment. It's right out in front. It's not hiding. Most people consider it the unconscious and all that stuff is so hidden that you have no idea what's going on. Not true. It's all right in front of you. You have to be able to analyze it and understand the signals that you're getting from the student to nail what they're doing wrong. I can analyze a student's playing in 4 bars. You can hear it, whether they hearing it.
There are videos of you doing this online with people, and there are also videos of you'll get someone to play a lick, and then you stop them, and then you get them to mentally, I would say audiate it, but hear it, and then you get them to play it again, and it sounds like night and day. And I do this all the time with students.
Yeah. So that's what Kuchavitsky did for me. He really opened it. He made it very clear. It's an incredible tool. If you look at your students that way, at what's coming out is what's happening. That's the reality. Not what's going on inside, what they think about the music, what they feel about it, not the internal. But what's coming out is what's happening. You can't second guess it. You have to say, you know what I'm saying? You have to analyze it for what it is.
Totally. And I think this is really why the oral tradition, and for me, learning licks and vocabulary, that is part of the oral tradition. There's a benefit to this because when you learn a lick or a melody and it's internalized to that point where you can hear it very strongly, and then you've done enough practice where it's coordinated with whatever instrument you play.
No, you're not supposed to play with your practice. You're suggesting that? No, that's not what it's for. It's for teaching you the rules. That's what it's for. The vocabulary teaches you the rules.
Yeah, and then
if it sounds good, the rules were used correctly. So you hear something that sounds good, look for the correct rules that are in it. And by playing it over and over, 12 keys, and messing it around, you find out the rules. Music teaches you. If it sounds good, the rules were used correctly. Reverse it. What does it mean when you reverse it?
So hold on, the original, if it sounds good, it means the rules were used correctly. So you mean...
If it doesn't sound bad, if it's...
You mean if it
sounds bad, if it sounds bad, the rules are not being used correctly, that's all.
Right. It's as simple as that. So if it sounds good, there are some rules in there that you've got to learn. You don't know what they are, but you embed those things. That's what vocabulary is for, basically. First of all the information you need to know about playing is in the vocabulary. So the vocabulary has to be preserved. That's crucial, and people, because the goal is not to develop a new vocabulary, but to find your way of using the vocabulary. Everybody uses, like I said, you find 5 self-taught musicians, they all use the vocabulary differently.
Yeah. And there's obviously a lot of cross-pollination that's subconscious. If you have a couple pieces of vocabulary from Bach that you really like. You got some Parker stuff. You got some Bill Evans stuff. You can't even help it. It just starts all mixing. You get the signal from it.
I don't think that's what happens. I don't think you're reiterating someone else's ideas.
I wouldn't say that. But there's it seems like there's some underlying structural things that happen. You might pick up, and it might not be explicitly as a conscious rule. You might not be saying to yourself, well, I noticed Bach, went up a seventh after the first beat. But there are little things you start noticing, and you have your own personal taste, and those things all start to kind of mix together. And it's not like when you're soloing, there's a conscious dialogue in your head, well, Bach did this, I'm going to do this. It's just your experience with it gives you this impulse to do that when you're about to take the solo. That impulse just shows up. And that's what it feels like for me anyway, when I'm playing on the change. There's like, you could do this. And the idea is just like pulls you into it.
Right.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to touch on though is from what I've noticed, the difference in learning, let's say you gave this example once on a thing I watched online where I think you guys were at Berkeley, you were singing like a Miles record, you all sang the solo, figured out how to play it. But traditionally what goes on, if you start with, let's say you start as a beginner and maybe you're doing a solo note by note, you don't get the gestalt of the vocabulary if you can't kind of hum the rhythm or sing the rhythm. If you're at the point where you're kind of pecking the song out note by note, it doesn't get linked in your nervous system properly. But if you can sing the head of the tune and you can hit the rhythm of it, without the instrument, that I feel like is going to lead more to this kind of this impulse that you're trying to develop, where the ideas kind of start spontaneously coming out of your mind while you're playing.
That happens only when you're in the zone. And the zone is in the limbic system. And the zone only occurs when you shut down the frontal lobe. All right. So the neurologists have discovered a neural pathway that bypasses the frontal lobe and goes directly from the ear to the limbic system. Bypasses the frontal lobe. So when you're playing, you're bypassing the frontal lobe, the conscious thought, because it's too slow. And,
For sure.
And there's ego involved. As soon as ego is involved, you're screwed. And the basic problem is that most players want to evaluate their playing while they're playing. It's just not possible. You can't do that. The brain can't do two things at once. It works in a serial manner. It could do all kinds of different things in a different order, but only one at a time. So you can't hear two ways at once. You can't be playing and evaluate your playing at the same time. And that's one of the hardest things to give up, is that drive to self-evaluate while playing. And you have to shut that down. You can't, and even your own evaluation of your playing during the process is going to be useless because you have no critical faculties at that point. Your cognitive
bandwidth has been maxed out. You might as well just record yourself and then just listen to yourself later if you want to actually check on it.
That's right.
Yeah, and then you have your whole mind to actually listen to what you played instead of how you were coming off at the jam session.
Yes, exactly.
Are you familiar with Charles Limb? Limb. Charles Limb.
No.
I worked with him he used to put, he probably still does, cochlear implants into children that are born deaf, and I was teaching them to learn music. But in subsequent studies, he created a MIDI keyboard that didn't have any metal in it, and he put jazz musicians in to the functional fMRI, and they'd have them play, a memorized solo over the blues or whatever changes, right? And then he said, okay, now create, a solo over these changes. And they noticed that this prefrontal cortex shut down.
Yes.
For the improvisation. Yeah, and then he's doing other things. He's doing Zakir Hussain. He's got him out going under the machine too, and checking out what are musicians doing in their heads. Well,
you know what? Most of those fMRIs and all that, most of these tests
It sounded like you might be heading in the direction of being skeptical about the results of the fMRI test. Is that, is that what's in your mind?
Yeah, because there's no way you can get into the zone.
No.
Oh, you mean while you're in that.
That environment.
Yeah.
I'm expecting to hear this 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Who's that?
Jamie Abersol.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
You're not going to access the zone in that environment because it's set. Not only it's mindset and setting, set and setting.
Yeah.
The setting is a cultural place,
but
the mindset is what we're talking about.
Yeah, the fact that you said, you can't have your prefrontal cortex play or be working is confirmed by this research that I'm talking about.
You can even feel it too. I mean, if you play with musicians you're quite comfortable with and tunes you're comfortable over, you tend to not really care as much because you're not worried and you get into that zone easier, I found, especially when I'm around musicians I'm comfortable with.
Well, you can't care at all.
Yeah.
You have to divorce yourself from all of that and just let it happen. And it's weird, hard to do because it's scary. It's like you feel like you're jumping off a cliff because you're not using your regular everyday tools to get through time,
Yeah.
You're using other tools and it's scary. You have to get confidence in your intuition and your instincts. Basically, all the training we're doing is instinctual and intuitional, And it's the intuition is the tool that is our tool, the jazz improvisers. It's never wrong, never. When your little voice tells you to do something and you ignore it, you're fucked. It's never wrong. If it tells you look outside and the sun is shining and you get a little message from your subconscious, take your umbrella, and you go, nah. And you go outside, and an hour later, you're soaked in rain. Because the lower brain was picking up information the conscious brain wasn't. Because the body is an antenna, The whole body is an antenna. It's picking up environmental signals all the time, let alone the internal signals that keep the body going, So
you can even feel this if you were going to, sometimes I'll do this with a student if they seem a bit hung up on making a mistake in a melody they're playing. I'll play it and purposely play a wrong note where they did. And when you intentionally play the wrong note, it doesn't feel bad because you're not judging it in the same way. It's hilarious to do that because it really doesn't feel bad. You're like, here it is.
Because you mean it. Yeah,
because you mean it. Exactly.
Now, I kind of want to bring up a subject here that we seem to be skirting around, And I came up with this. A lot of the idea, I've been for decades convinced there's always good scientific basis for everything that's going on in the brain, right? There's reasons for it.
I'm with you on that one.
Okay, I'll tell you a story. I never copied Bill Evans. When I first heard Bill Evans, I was really upset because I thought we felt I was going in a similar direction, and he was ahead of me. And I didn't want to be influenced by him, so I never copied him. I listened to him, but I never copied his voicings or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So about the year 2000, in 2000, all of a sudden, I felt I was being called to Bill Evans, right? And that was when I was involved in research with the forward motion as well. Anyway, but I had to. It was my position was I had to figure out. I was getting a signal, but I couldn't define it. In other words, something was attracting me to Bill, and I couldn't define what it was. Now Bill was dead, so I spoke to everybody that played with him that I knew, everybody that shot up dope with him that I knew. Everybody that studied with him that I knew, anybody that hung with him that I knew. I got some really good dissertations, some really stupid ones on him. And I still didn't find my answer. I couldn't figure out what it was that was calling me, why Bill was. So finally I got down and to isolate the problem. I realized his melodic lines were not attracting me because I'm happy with my line playing. Um, and his rhythmic approach, I'm very happy with because I've been into rhythm since I started. I have no questions about that. The only thing that left was the harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And I had some help just from some good friends, but what the stunning realization was, there's a record called Practice Tape #1 with Bill Evans practicing. You know, I mean, that's key to find out how someone practiced and learned. It's really important. In any case, I realized that in the end, my little voice for decades had been saying, Al, your voicings suck. You've really got to do them over. And that's what Bill's message was to me. It wasn't that I had to copy something from Bill Evans. Bill Evans was telling me what I needed to do. In other words, when you copy a musician, you're not finding out what they're doing. They're telling you what you need to work on. If you are attracted to something, this is my theory, right? We're all born with these neurons that are neutral, except that the DNA has whatever talent genes in it. But they're basically neutral, and they're waiting for external stimulation to come alive. And you hear a note, and one of those neurons gets set off, right? And it gets to be live. That means it's telling you something about yourself. So when I was listening to Bill Evans, it was setting off all these neurons, these Bill Evans style neurons, and making them alive and making me realize and hearing the chords that I was playing were not cool.
Yeah.
So it's nature and nurture, you know. There are all of these these neutral, or maybe even they have predispositions. Jews tend to play minor things a lot, you know. Jewish music is very minor, so there's a DNA talent gene there somewhere that makes people hear minor. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You go to Bosnia and you're playing in 15/8. It's natural to them, but let them swing in 4/4. You know what I mean? So it depends on a bunch of presets in these neural lines. They get set off by external stimulation. So Bill's playing was setting off this. He's telling me that there were certain neurons that were jumping, that needed to be honored, needed to be trained. You know, it took me 10 years to change my voicings around. 10 years. I have them now. He knew counterpoint. That was the big difference I found out.
Yeah. I remember hearing you talk about that on one of your videos somewhere.
So that's when I realized the truism of this saying about art's supposed to teach you something about yourself you never knew before. Wow. So the big mystery is, how do I hear? How do I play? What's my style? How do I feel about the rhythm? Well, the solutions are out there in what stimulates you from the environment, you know. So if you're listening to records, which you have to do 28 hours a day, you're setting off those neurons and you're building up these, what are they called? Neural ensembles, you know, collecting them larger, and the neural ensemble gets larger and larger as years go by. And eventually you are what you have been working on. You know what I mean? You become that.
Yep.
You know? It draws it out of you. It's not like you're taking external information and memorizing it in order to play it. No, you're taking the external information to learn how you feel, hear, and think about music.
Totally.
It's amazing. I love it.
I was just gonna say, like, that's so useful to know as a musician who's, you know, I would say you're doing mostly self-teaching if you're doing that kind of thing. You're listening to records and you have teachers, but
they're all traditional self-teaching anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But I was gonna say too, like, that's really useful as a teacher to know. Like, one of the things I found has helped me a lot as a teacher. I teach people of all ages. I teach mainly guitar and piano. Is that if someone's listening to like I have this one student, she's really into Taylor Swift. I have no idea why. She just has that music internalized. Why would I not support that and help her discover, like, what is it in that? Does she like the guitar parts? Is it the drum parts? Or from album to album it changes? Like, I almost see part of my role is not just informational, here's the C chord, is to actually show, like, there's something in this music that is, like, important to you, and you should hit the gas on that.
That's right.
And not having, but what's funny is I teach, like, no one else Taylor Swift songs. I don't care about that.
I tell my students, practice only what you like.
Exactly.
You're not going to learn it if you don't like it.
It's been my experience. It's been my, and I, you know, this is kind of how I end up finding you, is that for some reason I'd listen to Parker, and the lines would just be so crystally crafted over the changes. It wasn't like I wanted to actually learn that specific line. Right. You know, it was just there's something about the way he was playing where when I hear other people take solos and it's kind of just a jumbled mess of no aim, it doesn't resonate with you the same way. And when I was younger, I had no idea what it was. I didn't know that he was, you know, had all this rhythmic vocabulary and this harmonic awareness. I didn't know any of that. It was just something about the way he was laying the thing down that just resonated.
Yeah. And
yeah, it's a blast to talk about. I mean, this is kind of the interesting thing about learning jazz from what I've seen anyway. It almost is very similar to, like, Zen. It has this quality where, like, proverbs often, as you talk about in Forward Motion, they often take 10 years to unravel, and then they're worth the, you know, they're a little spiritual insight once you kind of pick up on something.
Well,
it's like they're sprinkled throughout your...
You're not going to get it until you've done the work to get it.
Yeah.
I've come up with I'm really having a problem with this oral tradition apprenticeship system article. Refresh me. What were you just talking about? Jesus Christ. What were we just?
I was just talking about how. I mean, we were talking about how the oral tradition, or just art at large, it's, you know, there's these impulses that you pick up on from being exposed to other people's artwork. And,
right,
you know,
right.
There's that impulse that you're picking up on. I was saying proverbs have something. They almost seem like koans, like, you know, this dizzy quote, like, play a rhythm and put a note to it. Don't think of chord tones first and then try to invent rhythms last. And,
right.
Like, I mean, depending on where you are with your playing, that could be more or less impossible to decipher, or very practical information.
Yeah, well, what I realized what he was saying is, you know, we spend a lot of time on notes, right? A lot of time on notes, but not enough time on rhythm. So usually, when you hear notey players, it's people who have achieved their halfway goal of being able to hear everything and play everything they hear. The next step is to hear everything and play as little of it as possible. And the only way you can do that is by shutting off melodic part and thinking rhythmically, and let the rhythm pick out the notes. That's what Dizzy's secret was. The rhythm picks out the notes. So if you could stop thinking note-wise and start thinking just rhythmically, you can't play what you practice when you think rhythmically. You can when you think note-wise. But the rhythm is disruptive, which is really important. Tension equals disruption. It's disruption of syncopation is rhythmic disruption. Creates tension, creates swing. I'm working hard. Dizzy made a statement about there being, you know, a continuum of ones, of series of quarter notes, right? Downbeats, right? And that time is a series of ones. But he's also saying there's a continuum of upbeats going on, right? So what I'm trying to do is change my feeling of the beat over to the upbeat side. And it's coming along. I'm not playing enough to be able to do it, but I'm getting it. And it's another world over there. It's a completely different perception of music. It's like nothing you ever saw before when you're on the upbeat side and when you're involved in the tension. And that's what Dizzy's talking about. The tension is swing, you know, get the upbeats happening. Once I get the upbeats going on, I hear everything differently now. You know?
Yeah.
It's
or even the change that I think a lot of people need to get to is just, as you've talked about, changing from quarter note time to half time.
Right.
Right? And Barry Harris talks about this too. He's like, everyone's slapping on 2 and 4. Like, you should be on 1 and 3. That's where that's what it really is.
Yes.
And that's just being able to like shoot off some of these bebop heads or even a Bach tune while you feel that time. People's rhythmic I have the lucky chance to teach this to people of all ages, but younger kids, if you get this online when they're pretty young, they sound like professional musicians like long before they should. It's just getting this halftime thing online. And that's something I picked up on from your book, and and as you're saying, this goes deeper too. Like, you're working on this whole other thing that's beyond that, where you're feeling the upbeats in a way that changes your whole relationship to everything. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think I use a shuffle beat, then I leave out the second part of it, so it's dum da 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 da. It's something really different. It feels like you're riding a wave, and like you're surfing. I can actually think I can feel the information flow. It feels like I'm surfing on an information flow, trying to keep my balance on the top of the wave, constantly. And you're moving, adjusting, fixing, refining. You've got a feedback loop, right, that's going on all the time. So you're correcting everything. Hold on a minute. Yes, sir.
Oh, excellent. I wanted to talk about this idea you had. The last two ideas you were talking about kind of riding this wave of this signal or this impulse that you get, and being able to ride it with, and how that links to rhythm. Because what I noticed, like when you're really hung up on choosing notes, on your instrument, that is kind of locked into this decision-making part of the brain that's up here, but the rhythm just comes from somewhere else. You're more likely to just go ba ba da ba 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 da rather than think, well, I'm going to put an eighth note there and then stuff like. So the rhythm seems like a way you can really just start shutting this front thing down and like you said, just following it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The rhythm will pick out the notes.
Because I've really found that same thing. The rhythm will pick out the note. I mean, you are to the point where if you do something, as you were saying before, it shouldn't really make sense over the change, but you hear it strongly enough, and there's some kind of rhythmic like impulse behind it. No one cares.
Right.
Right. I remember when I was first getting into this, like I was having this kind of intimation that I wanted to have the skill of being able to like weave into these chord changes. When you get too hung up on the notes, it can feel almost like a prison, because you're like, I gotta hit these tones on these, like it's just totally backwards. And I found that's the advice that was often given to me from the really information heavy sources, and not so much the cultural sources like the records and studying with the masters.
It's a tricky thing. God damn it! If I don't say my sentence, right away I'll forget what I was saying.
You have a free pass to cut me down at any time to jump in.
I have this sleep apnea, and it's affected my short-term memory.
Yeah.
I mean, I could if someone interrupts my sentence, I'm done. I can't remember what I was talking about. Dizzy made a major change in my life. He totally turned me around completely from to thinking rhythm first. It was a revelation, a real revelation.
What was going on before Dizzy kind of flipped you on that? What was your thought process towards this? Was it really?
I thought I was thinking note-wise.
Yeah.
I knew I was thinking note-wise. I was not thinking rhythm-wise. And I had to. It was. I was playing what I practiced. I was playing what I knew. If you're playing what you know, you're not creating. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Okay, learning this vocabulary. It's a two-way sword. I used to take a lick to work every night. And I'd play it 3 times.
Yeah.
During the night. It's tricky. When I was working on the pentatonics,
you
can hear it in my playing in the early part of it. It's just line after line after line after line. No breaks, no rhythms. It wasn't until I got to dizzy that I was able to phrase them, not play them in patterns, but play them as melodies. You know, but it's a two-edged sword to play with intention. You really don't want to go up saying, I'm going to play this or I'm going to play that. The idea is to play without intention and just let it happen, you know. Just stay open, you know, and it'll happen. But you have to trust yourself to do that. And that's the biggest problem I find. Students, they don't trust themselves. They trust their brain because they're used to using it to get through life every day. They trust their intellect, but when they shut their intellect off, a lot of people find that frightening. It's like a dissociative event. I can't wait to get it disassociated.
Yeah.
I love it, you know.
Well,
I think that's a lot.
Audiation is something that is disassociated from just about everything else, you know, intellectually in the brain.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
he is trying to, you know, Dr. Gordon, trying to get your body and, you know, and he thought that rhythm was fundamental to harmony and tonal elements because
I know what it was I was going to tell you. Let me interrupt you. All right, I'm gonna run this by you and see what you think. Okay, I think I figured out what swing is. All right. If you're lying on a beach, enjoying yourself, relaxing, you're not aware of the passage of time. I've asked a bunch of scientists, and I asked them what is the fastest thing in the universe, and they said the letter in Einstein's theory of relativity that has to do with the speed of light, which is 243,000 miles a second. Okay, so we're taking the assumption that time passes at the speed of light, because that's the fastest thing in the universe. All right, but you can't feel it, can you? You cannot feel the passage of time. Feeling the passage of time is a subjective event, not objective. All right.
Yes.
So, but if you take time and you segment it, all right, into small bits, repetitive small bits, okay, you're compressing time, and what happens is you create selective pressure to act. You don't know what I'm talking about, right? Selective pressure. Bring me back, please.
what swing is on the beach.
Oh yes, it's metered time. If you can, or I say you give an arranger a job to arrange 3 months in advance, he's going to fuck off until 4 days before it, right? But as
for sure.
As time approaches, the pressure to do it increases, but he still hasn't acted. Not enough pressure to create a real world action. You understand? 4 days before he has to deliver it, he starts taking speed, drinking a lot of coffee because the pressure is on him, and he acts.
Totally.
So that's the way an idea works. There has to be enough. First, you have to have disruption, syncopation, which takes the passage of time and breaks it up in uneven groupings, right? Creates tension. All right, so if you take time, let's see, for instance, the American Indian tells time by the seasons, right? When it's becoming winter, it creates pressure to move to where the good weather is and to get your food for the season, all that stuff. In other words, it's creating real world action, the pressure of time. So you don't feel time until you segment it. And when you segment it into groups of 4 beats, that's an incredible amount of pressure you create. And that's what swing is. The only thing that's undiscovered is the energy that passes from the musician through the air to the listener. That hasn't been examined. There isn't a neurologist that has looked at that part yet, which is the part that is most mysterious, the energy. But that's what swing is. You have time, you're segmenting it into even bits, and you're adding energy to it, and it creates a tension that shuts down the frontal lobe and gets you right to the limbic system.
Yeah, you can feel that too. Like if you're playing with that sense of forward motion, there's something you're pre-hearing down the line that's creating pressure towards that part of the song, whether it's a rhythm or a note, and the line will kind of start crafting itself to that point, and then before you even get there, you're already on to where the next thing is taking you, and that's what it feels like to kind of ride that chunk, that perception wave. It's yeah.
That's the energy thing is really a mystery.
Yeah.
Case story. I was playing with Chet Baker on the West Coast at Shelley's Manhole, and Philly Joe came in. And I came up listening to Philly Joe. I thought, boy, someday I'm going to get a chance to play with Philly. I'm going to play my ass off. So here is Philly on the stand, 5 feet away from me, swinging furious and giving me nothing. Nothing. No ones, no downbeats, no energy, nothing. Because what he sensed from me was I was riding on his coattails. And he wasn't going to let me ride on his groove. He was telling me, Al, you got to add to the groove yourself. You can't be using my groove. He didn't look at me. He didn't smile at me. Nothing. It was weird, okay? All right, years later now, I'm with Cannonball's band, and we're playing Just Jazz in Philadelphia. And Philly Joe comes in and sits in. Cannon counts off Blue and Boogie real fast, and I missed the count off. So all through the tune, I was guessing, playing by radar. I couldn't get back in. I couldn't find one. Philly's not looking at me. He's not smiling. He's not giving me any energy whatsoever. It was a repeat of the Chet Baker thing, okay? A year later, we came back to Just Jazz again, and Philly Joe came in to sit in, and Cannonball counts off on the mountain, right, and gives me the first solo. I take the break. I'm ahead of Philly, and I lead Philly through the whole solo. He's looking at me, smiling and laughing, and we're playing along together and all that stuff. He had been waiting almost 10 years for me to get my groove together before he he remembered me from the Chet Baker thing. His masters were just amazing, and it was. I have a tape. I have a tape of it. I have a CD of that tune. I have a CD somewhere of the Blue and Boogie. I can't find it, or I'm lost. But I have my recovery on that blues with Philly. It was an interesting thing. Energy goes where you think it's going. If you don't think of where it's going, it stays up in the bandstand and fucks everybody else up. You have energy goes where you think it's going. When I learned that, I started thinking out to the audience and made an incredible difference in that time. I had never occurred to me that energy was a tool you could directly use your personal energy. And it's not a regular kind of energy. I learned that with Cannonball because Billy Hart warned me. He says, you better get plenty of rest because that's a high energy band. I was with them for over 2 years. The first year, I was exhausted because the energy I was using was regular work energy. But there's another kind of energy that comes deeper down. It took me a year to access that deeper energy that isn't physical. I hate the word spiritual, so I'm not going to use it.
Sure. There's not really a better word, though. So.
It's not physical, and it doesn't exhaust you. So no one has ever analyzed that energy. What is it comprised of? That's the biggest mystery of jazz, as far as I'm concerned. Why? Where does that energy come from? What is the nature of it? The neurologists, because they're still in their Western mindset, they just ignore the issue. They all talk about notes. All the neurological studies talk about notes. Notes.
Yeah, where does groove come from? Or when the band's in the pocket, what's that mean? And what's the difference between the two? These are things that I can't find any understanding of. People talk around it, But like, what is that? But it comes from this energy that you're talking about. Is what I think.
It's also synchronization and placement in the flow of time. That's
Mm-hmm.
crucial. Articulation, and I think a large part of it has to do with articulation and where you're placing your lines within the flow of time.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to find their place in the time where they play and stay there. You don't want two people playing at the same place on the beat. Duplication is death in this music. You want everybody doing something different. So
something kind of in the same wheelhouse that I've heard you talk about with a couple of the clinics you did online, that you have posted online, with some combos, where the Western mindset being a musician is like, I'm a musician, I'm here, I'm separate from the rest of the band. And when you hear people play like that, like, one, they don't listen to the rest of the band, but this other more like, we call it the cultural side of jazz, or the what I would call the more authentic mindset, is that the group is its own organism. And when you have people playing together with that mindset online in their nervous system, or with the energy, or whatever you want to call it, it's way different than someone thinking like, well, the changes are coming, now I play my solo, and I'm probably listening to my solo more than the rest of the band, and it loses like kind of the whole spirit of the project. Like, the whole point for doing this project is a social thing. Even if you're playing alone, there's a listener at some end of the equation, and yeah, that's I always find that fascinating.
A lot of the decisions about what to play when are done by the listener, because we're actually psychologists. One thing you never see discussed is presentation. You never see it. The reason being, that was something that came into play when bands were playing 6 nights a week at one place, and then another week at another, and you were playing the same music over and over again. Presentation becomes important.
Well, this is why the apprenticeship system is also what's needed, because you can't learn those skills in a book. You have to learn those skills by being around other musicians and an audience. That's the only environment where you can learn that. You can read about it, but still not learning.
And you have to be playing with a master. You have to play. Yeah. All the masters that I played with, they all had awe. Awe. A-W-E.
Yeah.
If your teacher doesn't have awe, you won't respect him. You won't listen. You won't take his advice. And every one of these guys had awe. It was, yes, sir, Mr. Baker. Yes, sir. You know what I mean? You did what they said, even if you didn't know what they meant. They'd tell you something and walk away, never explain it, and you knew something was there. They want you to find your own explanation, which is the beauty of the oral tradition. Is this anything that defined the oral tradition is its focus on individuation.
Then we were lucky enough to have a really good conversation with Rand Blake. I'm not sure if you know about Rand. He's at New England Conservatory, but he's just a monster. His ear for harmony is great. But most of what he talks about is creating an individual style, how you go about doing that. And it's from imitating the masters and copying them and finding the things that you resonate, as you say. Like after following you and Rand, I just have this. There's something in I don't know what you want to call it, soul, R&B, all that kind of rhythmic thing. There's something that calls me from that kind of music, and so now I don't question it. I just listen to it.
The second line.
That's it. It's in all of that stuff, and I don't know why. So I just have some Ray Charles on the playlist because there's something in there that is important to some part of me, and I can't explain why it is.
Syncopation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's getting you. Syncopation. Syncopation is totally disruptive. It breaks patterns. Every time you break a pattern, you have to improvise a solution. That's what it's all about. Breaking patterns. So if you have a continuous flow of quarter notes, you are segmenting time, the passage of time, into bars of 4 quarter notes, and then adding energy to that, your own personal energy to that. That's it. That's it. I forgot what I was going to say.
Yeah, no.
I got out of it gracefully.
Well, you're improvising right now too.
Yeah. But it's pattern breaking. That's what's attracting you. The tension of syncopation feels great.
Yeah, really, it does.
Tension equals swing. Most guys play their swing beat backwards, starting on the beat. You're supposed to accent the upbeat.
Yeah.
Totally counterintuitive. Totally counterintuitive. Yeah. I read an article, must be 30 years ago, by piano player, where he said, I can't retrieve proper nouns. He said, you accent the upbeat. Yeah. I looked at that and it doesn't make any sense. Threw it away. It took me 30 years to realize what a mistake that was. And I've been scrambling to get on that upbeat side ever since. That's
there's a great tape of Edwin Gordon, the guy Eric was talking about, saying, everyone's feeling the quarter note of the downbeat anyway. Don't accent it. They already feel it. Accent the other stuff because that's what's gonna bring. Like everyone feels the big beat, so why are you accenting it? We all know where it is.
Yeah.
I like the way he said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you got to know where one is all the time.
Yeah. Well, Hal, I just want to say it's been really nice talking to you. Some of your ideas have been on my mind for the past 5 or 6 years as I've tried to, navigate that whole thing. That's clearly been your life interest.
Have we gotten through all of your questions?
Pretty much. I mean, I think unless there's anything Eric wants to touch on, but I just had a great time just sharing some of the thoughts I've had from reading your work and listening to your playing.
I'm thrilled just being part of the conversation, listening to your ideas about all this and how they connect to how, students or musicians learn to be musical, learn to capture that energy, learn to capture line, learn to capture, relationship to their audience, how that all comes together and becoming, the musician they see themselves as, or they're becoming based on what their brain is telling them, matches, the outside world.
Especially with something like jazz, I feel like that's such an important conversation to have like early on in the project because it can be a very information-dense field of study, chords, rhythms, songs, standards. But if you forget, the whole reason for engaging in the art form, it gets away from people. And you clearly see this with people that are studying jazz at universities. Like they're not developing a personal style, they're just kind of floundering in information for 4 years, and they got nothing to show for it at the end of it. And no wonder you'd be frustrated with that.
Well, in the earlier generations, musicians weren't that schooled. Yeah. Almost everybody, Buchanan's band, Matt played completely by ear. If he wanted to show me a change, he'd play it on his trumpet. Mm. That's how information was passed, or sang.
Yep. Errol Garner the same way. Errol Garner couldn't read a lick.
No, I know, and he could play Mozart and everything else. Ahmad told me that when Errol came into a club, if whoever was on the piano just stopped playing and got off, and let him get on. He was the king of Pittsburgh.
That's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that I think that side of learning music is often underemphasized until people study with someone who's really kind of been around the block and not only can play the music but has led a band and helped other people kind of light the fire. Like you're talking about studying with Dizzy and all these great players, and Dizzy clearly had that ability to help other people bring it out with them. Like I watched. He's always teaching. Yeah. So.
I learned so much.
Yeah.
And Mike Longo.
Mike's great. I have his tapes on his rhythm stuff. It's great.
I got all 3 of them. Yeah.
I wish I had it 10 years ago.
I wish I had the time to listen to them, again.
Yeah.
But he was the one that was saving Disney stuff, preserving his legacy. That legacy is crucial. Disney told me once, I spent a week with him, or he spent a week with Phil's band on the road in Europe. And every night I played a duo with him. Wow. He said, Hal, Bird invented the melodies, I invented the rhythm. How about that?
Yeah.
And it was true. All week long, I went on. He was showing, I'm still absorbing the experience. I've never been so quickly in 1 week affected by one man. And they talk about great men. There aren't many around. But knowing Dizzy, I met a great man. I met one great man. I mean, when he was around, special stuff happened, always. It's like he had a vibe. There was some magic. He used to use the word magic all the time. He says, it's all in the air. All the notes are in the air. All you got to do is pick them out. That was and just to end the conversation, we played this Con Alba duet 7 times. Right? And the last time, I have a tape of it, was just flawless. I played great. Dizzy played great. The interaction was great. And then at the end of the tune, it came to Dizzy's cadenza, and one of the things that's hard to do when you're a player is to wait, because your brain is firing off signals saying play, 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 and you have to wait. So, and I'm usually pretty good at that, but he was doing his cadenza, and for some reason I lost my patience and I hit a chord, and it was the wrong chord. The last chord I played for Dizzy in his life was wrong. Wrong. I never saw him again after that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
always the teacher.
I have a recording of it.
That probably worked out good for your own, self-education. You probably always wanted to.
He never said anything about it. He made it right. He changed the notes to make it right. And he knew what happened. He never said anything about it. And it was the last gig with Dizzy. The last gig I saw, because we were kind of tight. We had run into each other over the years and become kind of, we were on one flight to Europe. He was in first class. He came back and hung out with me for the whole flight in coach, and talked.
Yeah.
What a great guy. I mean, amazing.
That's great. Well, Hal, we really appreciate you coming by today, and I wish you all the best with that article that you're working on now. I'd love to read it if you want to shoot off a copy of it.
I'm having trouble getting started because it's such a big... Here's my feeling that the oral tradition has a place in Western education. I do believe that. The problem is you can't sell the oral tradition. When you're selling in the information, you're selling information. That's basically it. It's based on economics. You're selling information. You're selling scales, chords, practice. That's what it is. But the oral tradition is nothing for you to sell.
Yeah. So I have a professor regarding your article and getting started in writing. He wrote a book on how to write. And I had him for 7 years in my master's degree program, and then I came back to my PhD program. Eventually I had to just fight back, like, no, my writing says what I want it to say. And he says, okay, now you're done. But like he was still picking at stuff, right? Always driving me to the nth degree and getting things exactly the way I meant them, written with no extra words in the sentence, no improper anything. A 4th grader should be able to read my dissertation and understand it. It was his point, right? It should all be in there. The first thing he said, you can't get started. Like, I was having trouble, like, it's like, don't write, just mind dump. Just mind dump. Just put anything. Just put shit on page. Just empty your brain, and then go there. So I don't know if that's a help at all, but that's
as they call the kitchen sink approach. I use it all the time.
oh, okay. So anyway, yeah, there you go.
I throw it all in there.
Yeah.
The problem, I think one of the things, I saw something from Spike Wilner where he was talking about smalls. I think what just happened to me this week, the jazz club environment is a particular social construct. That, I think the jazz clubs were in themselves a really important part of this whole tradition, you know.
I totally agree.
The environment of a jazz club, the whores, the pimps, the criminals, the bartenders, the waitresses, the hustlers, the audience, the whole complex of the cultural envelope that this music existed in needs to be recreated. I think Spike Wilner did that with Small, you know, because that was where you learned your craft. You didn't learn it in school, you learned it on bandstands. Right?
Yeah.
So the club environment, I think, was a major part of the cultural envelope that music existed in.
First time I walked into the Village Vanguard, I about wept. You know, I just about wept because
this is it, right?
I was like, oh my God, I don't care what they play. I don't care if they play.
Hal, I totally agree with the club being an aspect of this, and you can see this because if you just hang out with musicians who have been in that environment, the way they play is different than people that have practiced the same amount but never played, you know, in front of an audience or with people. It's just, it does something to the project that you can't emulate unless you're in that environment.
Listen, Cannonball's band, they were so strong they kicked my ass around the bandstand for a year. For a year. It took me a year to get my strength up to match that rhythm section. I mean, when you're playing, you can't, I'll never be as strong as I was with that, playing with Cannonball. Never. Because you can't save it up, you know, you have to keep playing it if there's a break. Get off, man. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'm having a real hard time this morning. Where was I? Bring me back. You have to. When I'm teaching, I have a student that's my minder and brings me back.
Yeah, no, just the importance of the clubs and the environment as being part of the education, and you can't. I think what we're getting at is you can't clone that, you know, if you're selling information, because people need to be in that authentic environment to learn properly.
A real world environment.
Yeah.
Apprenticing with people better than you. I get a lot of musicians who are playing with. Dave Baker said you don't learn anything playing with your peers. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Pat Metheny talks about that. I've heard him talk about that multiple times. Like, if you're the best person in the band, get out of that band as soon as you can.
I'm the best person in my trio.
Yeah.
I have to do it all myself. Fuck.
I know.
That's why I like playing with Jerry Bergonzi. It takes some of the weight off me. You know?
Oh yeah, he's a monster. He's a great guy.
Yeah. So.
That's great stuff.
Yeah, I think the club culture is probably the major. Wouldn't you say the major cultural element in the local tradition?
Oh well, I think you can't not factor it in. It's in all the stories. You know, it's in all the lineages. It's in all of the learning. You know, maybe what we should do, if you're interested, we should have you back on in the future. It could be whenever, a week or a month later. We should just have a talk about this kind of cultural aspect of jazz. You know, what goes into it and what's going wrong with the institutions and jazz education, not putting that on. I mean, we don't have to go there, but like some of these cultural things with jazz, because it's just so valuable to even talk to somebody about it, because you're in that.
I haven't delineated all the cultural values. It just came to me a couple of weeks ago when I saw that in Spike Wilner's newsletter that I've been looking for a way to describe the culture that jazz, the cultural envelope that jazz lives in, and it is the bandstand at school. Yeah. Did you read my article on the Jazz Masters Guild on my website?
I tore through your website over the past year or two, but that was the last time I probably read it. I just don't remember which one. I don't remember what it was about off the top of my head. But I've read, I think, everything on your site.
It was my solution to the problem, which was you have a bunch of leaders having their own student groups all over the country. They a decentralized school, where in each town, like in New York, you could have 20 masters teaching groups. Chicago maybe 10, LA another 20. All having their own groups, leading their own groups of students, and playing every week with their teacher. As part of the group.
Yeah.
And financially, I think it would work. I just didn't have the money to do the proposals, flesh out the proposals, to get work out a financial system, a structure for it. But basically, it's a decentralized thing where the masters run their own bands,
Mm-hmm.
And their student bands, and they're supported that way. They have to pay a tuition to the master. The master should get $100,000 a year just for that alone, And they travel around.
Mm-hmm.
It's on my website. You'll find it there somewhere. It needs tightening up, but it would have worked 20 to 30 years ago, but now all those guys are dead. So
you're not dead. We can still use you.
Not yet.
Yeah.
It's getting lonely out here, man.
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you guys go. I've been enjoying the hand tune.
No, it's been really great. I mean, this is what Eric and I. This is why we do this. We just have a great time, talking about this stuff because we're all interested in it, and that's the point. You get to know other people, and you just have good experiences, and that's why we're all playing music and talking to each other.
That's great. Good luck with your stuff. Whatever you're working on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Al.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Let me know if I've been able to help or if there's anything I can do.
Oh, you're tremendous, and we might be touch down the road if you're willing. That'd be awesome.
Anytime.
Yeah.
We'll keep you on track. We'll try.
Right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it, man.
All right.
All right.
Cheers.
Yep.